A team makes a decision, and the path forward appears clear. 1 week later, the same topic is back on the agenda. This recurrence is often seen as a failure of decisiveness, but it points to a different reality. A decision is not a final event, but a step in a continuous process.
This experience is common because decisions are often treated as endpoints. Within an organization, however, a decision is a starting point that must be adapted as its environment responds.
The prevailing belief is that decision-making is a linear process that concludes with a single permanent choice. This represents a rational model of decision-making. It suggests a logical progression through distinct steps to identify the optimal outcome. The model's primary limitation is that its underlying assumptions are rarely met. Complete information is seldom available, and time is a constant constraint. In practice, decisions are made under significant constraints, which necessitates a more pragmatic approach. A more realistic model acknowledges these limitations. The ability to make a perfectly rational choice is constrained by the information, time, and cognitive resources available. Because finding an optimal solution is often not feasible, the search is instead for an alternative that is acceptable and sufficient for the immediate circumstances. This method of selecting the first option that meets a minimum threshold is an efficient way to make progress. It conserves time and effort by avoiding an exhaustive search for a perfect but potentially unattainable outcome. Limited information is the first complication. The second is that conditions do not remain static after a choice is made. A team makes a sufficient choice based on the information available at a particular moment. This action then causes reactions. The market may shift, competitors can adjust their strategies, or other internal teams may alter their own plans in response. These responses produce new data and feedback that did not exist before the decision was implemented. This feedback loop makes revisiting the original decision a necessary function for navigating a dynamic environment. It is an adaptation to new information, not a failure of the initial choice. Even when new information suggests a change is warranted, psychological forces often create resistance to altering an established course of action. Once a decision becomes the new default state, a psychological preference emerges to maintain it, even when superior alternatives become available. This bias is driven by loss aversion, a tendency to feel the negative impact of a potential loss more strongly than the positive impact of an equivalent gain. This makes any change from the current state feel inherently risky. A different psychological pattern can emerge when a decision is not simply challenged, but is actively failing to produce desired results. Rather than changing course, a common tendency is to increase investment in a failing decision. This is often done to validate the initial choice. Past, irrecoverable investments of time or money, known as sunk costs, are used to justify continued investment, even if an objective analysis indicates a different path would be better. These two biases create a tension. One resists any change to the current state, while the other pushes for more commitment to a failing path in order to justify past actions. Understanding these practical and psychological dynamics helps to explain why decisions are frequently revisited. Revisiting decisions is a normal function of an organization, adapting to new information while navigating inherent psychological biases.